Dias is a veteran soldier who, after spending decades fighting in war, is rewarded by the king with his own domain. It has already been a month since he was half forced into a carriage and sent away from the royal capital, and to be honest, he isn't very happy about leaving. Once the carriage finally comes to a stop, one of the officials tells him that they have arrived at his new domain, saying it is a fitting reward for an upstart orphan like him. The official hands him a map showing the boundaries of the territory, along with an inventory of supplies personally provided by the king. He explains that this grassland is called Nezros and that, from this day onward, Dias will be known as Dias Nezros. Dias simply stares at him with a blank expression until the official leaves. With nothing else to do, Dias decides to take a walk around his new domain, and as he walks across the endless grasslands, he remembers the day the king granted him this territory as a reward for his achievements during the war. He doesn't really understand what it means to be a lord, but from what little he was told, a lord's job is to live in his domain, protect his subjects, and collect taxes for the king. He keeps walking for hours, but he doesn't meet a single person, and there isn't even a tree in sight. He decides to stop and rest for a while, and as he drinks some water from a nearby stream, he can't help but smile because after spending so many years drinking muddy water on the battlefield, having access to clean water feels like a luxury. By the time night falls, Dias comes to a decision. He tells himself that he is going to give this place his best shot, but if things still look hopeless after another 2 days, he will leave before he ends up dying out here. If it comes to that, he will simply find a nearby village and make himself useful however he can, so that he can continue honoring his parents' dying wishes. With that, he lies down on the ground and goes to sleep. The next morning, Dias is suddenly awakened by someone kicking him. He looks up in confusion and sees a young girl staring down at him. Before he even has time to process what is happening, she demands to know who he is and what he is doing there. Dias calmly introduces himself and tells her that he was sleeping. She looks completely baffled and asks if he's an idiot, but Dias simply explains that he was told to live here, and right now, his immediate goal is to stay alive because he doesn't want to die. The girl becomes increasingly frustrated, convinced that he has to be joking, but Dias assures her that he is being completely serious. He tells her that he wants to fulfill his parents' dying wishes by being useful to others and protecting people whenever he can. The moment he finishes speaking, the horn growing from her forehead suddenly begins glowing with a faint blue light. She stares at him in confusion and asks why he isn't lying, but Dias simply replies that he has no reason to lie, causing the horn to glow blue once again. She immediately asks whether he is an enemy or an ally, but Dias hesitates because they only just met. Growing impatient, she demands an answer, and Dias suddenly realizes that this is his domain. If that's the case, then she must be one of his subjects, and there is no reason for him not to stand by her. He immediately declares that he is her ally and promises that no matter what enemy appears, he will protect her. The instant those words leave his mouth, the horn shines brighter than ever before, forcing Dias to cover his eyes as he wonders what just happened. Without giving him any explanation, the girl grabs him and drags him back to her village so he can meet the chieftain. As they arrive, Dias notices all the villagers staring suspiciously at him. But the only thing he can think about is how surprised he is that he somehow failed to find this village yesterday, despite wandering around the area all day. When they meet the chieftain, she immediately asks the girl whether her horn glowed red at any point, and the girl, whose name is Alna, shakes her head and says it remained blue the entire time. She even explains that when she asked whether Dias was her ally, the blue light became brighter than ever after he answered yes. Curious, the chieftain asks Dias, "If you are Alna's ally, would you also become mine?" Without even pausing to think about it, Dias says of course he would. He says everyone here is his subject, and after all, the king sent him here to protect them. The moment he mentions the king, Alna immediately draws her bow and points it at him. But before she can do anything else, the chieftain raises a hand and tells her not to be hasty. The chieftain introduces herself as Mol and asks Dias to start from the beginning and explain exactly how the king ended up sending him here, and Dias agrees and begins talking about his past. His earliest memories are of living with his parents. His mother always told him to do work that other people would find useful, while his father always told him to become a man who protects the weak. Those ended up becoming their final words to him before they both died during an epidemic when he was 10 years old. After losing his parents, Dias gathered together other children who had become orphans as well. They earned money by cleaning the town and collecting rewards for hunting weak monsters, and throughout it all, Dias always tried to live according to his parents' wishes. When he turned 15, war broke out and he volunteered to fight so he could protect the people important to him. As the years passed, he discovered that he had a natural talent for warfare, and after fighting for 20 long years, the war finally came to an end. As a reward for everything he had accomplished, the king granted him this domain. After hearing his story, Mol believes Dias is sincere when he says he wants to protect his subjects, but she asks him one more question. If they weren't his subjects, would he still choose to be their ally? Dias immediately answers yes, but only after saying it does he realize something important. They were never his subjects to begin with, and, in fact, they are enemies of the kingdom. Mol finally introduces herself properly as the chieftain of the Anakin tribe. For generations, her people have fought against the kingdom over ownership of these grasslands, but 50 years ago, they suffered a crushing defeat and were forced to flee. Dias wonders how they managed to continue living here after losing the war, so Mol demonstrates the answer. By storing mana inside the horns on their heads, the Anakin are able to cast a variety of powerful spells. Using that magic, they conceal their entire village from the outside world, hiding not only the village itself, but every trace of their presence. Dias is a little uncertain about whether Mol should really be telling him all of this since he technically serves the kingdom, but Mol reassures him that there is nothing to worry about. She explains that if his horn reading had been anything other than blue, she never would have revealed any of this to him. The Anakin possess a spell called Soul Appraiser. Whenever they are in the presence of danger or hostility, the horn on their head shines red. If the other person is harmless and bears no hostility, it shines white, while blue means that person will one day bring joy or blessings to the tribe. She explains that if Dias had lied to them at any point, Alna's horn would have immediately turned red, but it never did, and that is why she chose to trust him. Mol says she hopes Dias becomes a superb lord one day, and she offers him shelter, food, and even some livestock to help him get started. In return, she asks only one thing, that he never tells anyone about the village, not even the king. Dias readily agrees because he has no reason to cause trouble for them. As long as they don't start another conflict with the kingdom, he doesn't mind them continuing to live peacefully on the plains. Mol then casually announces that she will be assigning Alna to help Dias with his work and look after him, causing Alna to immediately let out a loud scream. The villagers help Dias set up a tent, and Alna explains that everyone in the village lives in tents because they can quickly pack everything up whenever they encounter a danger that can't simply be avoided through concealment. She tells Dias that the rest of his supplies will be delivered shortly and that she will teach him how to care for the livestock later. Before he leaves, she hands him a small pouch of Mittani dust and explains that when it is scattered around, its scent attracts nearby beasts. If he hunts those beasts, he can bring their meat and hides back to the village and trade them for more supplies. Dias immediately heads out to hunt. After walking a good distance away from the village, he suddenly realizes that he forgot to ask Alna how much Mittani dust he was supposed to use. Since he has no idea, he simply pours out the entire bag and waits. It doesn't take long before a herd of black geese comes charging toward him. Rather than panicking, Dias looks excited. His instincts from years on the battlefield immediately take over as he swings his battle axe with overwhelming strength. By the time the fighting is over, nearly half the herd has been wiped out, but Dias then realizes he has overlooked one very important problem. There is no way he can carry all of them back by himself. By the time the sun begins setting, Dias is slowly making his way back to the village with a single black geese slung over his shoulders. He feels a little disappointed that after defeating so many of them, he could only bring one back, and he figures Alna is probably going to make fun of him again. However, when he arrives, Alna is actually impressed and praises him for bringing down a black geese on his very first hunt. Dias casually tells her that this wasn't the only one he killed. He explains that he actually hunted nearly half a herd but couldn't carry the rest back. The moment Alna hears that, she immediately runs off to gather some of the villagers so they can help retrieve the remaining black geese. After hearing what happened, Mol comes over to congratulate Dias. She calls him strong and superbly manly, leaving Dias confused about what she means by manly, and when he asks her to explain, Mol tells him that a man's value comes from whether he is hardworking and dependable. According to her, those are the qualities that make a man truly manly, and anything else has no value to a woman. Mol then casually remarks that if Dias were ever to marry Alna, people would naturally expect a much larger wedding gift than usual. Dias immediately tries to deny that anything like that is happening, but Mol simply laughs and tells him not to worry, because humans and Anakin are perfectly capable of having children together. The next morning, Dias wakes up to find Alna preparing breakfast for him. After taking a bite, he tells her that she's a very good cook. Alna then asks what he plans to hunt today, and Dias wonders whether yesterday's haul wasn't enough. She explains that if Dias hopes to attract more people to settle in his domain, he's going to need things like a well and a privy. If he wants the village's craftsmen to build them, he will need more goods to trade. Dias immediately says he'll go hunt more black geese, but Alna quickly refuses. Instead, she tells him to hunt monsters. Their meat is too full of miasma for anyone to eat, but their claws, horns, and the magic stones inside their hearts can all be sold for a good price. Dias asks whether there are any monsters nearby, and Alna says she can use the power of her horn to track them down. Dias objects at first because he thinks monsters are too dangerous for her to get involved with, but after some reluctance, he finally agrees to let her guide him. Later that day, Dias is outside brushing the sheep's wool when several villagers arrive with the rest of his supplies. They apologize that his yurts haven't been finished yet, but Dias tells them not to worry because he isn't in any hurry. Just then, Alna walks out wearing clothes suitable for traveling, and Dias can't help being captivated by her for a brief moment. The nearby villagers immediately become so jealous that they look ready to explode, while Dias awkwardly clears his throat and tells Alna that they should get going if they're going hunting. They are in the middle of traveling when Alna recites a spell and uses magic to pinpoint exactly where a monster is. Alna tells Dias that it's a big monster. Dias tells her he will take a look first, but Alna refuses and reminds him that she can use concealment, and if things take a bad turn, she can always use concealment on both of them and they can escape. Dias and Alna look together and find out it's an earth dragon and not just a big turtle. Dias decides to try giving it a whack. Alna warns him not to try it, saying it is too reckless to charge in alone, but Dias doesn't listen and decides to fight head-on. He tells her to stay out of sight. Dias takes a swing at its scaly body with his axe but finds that the scales are too tough to break through. He then switches tactics and tries going for its weak spot, but the earth dragon covers all its weak points and curls up to protect them. Alna again reminds Dias that taking on an earth dragon is too reckless, but Dias would rather run out of options than retreat. He climbs onto the dragon's back and continues swinging his axe, hoping to break through, but the blade begins to chip. Still, he pushes forward, using his will to reinforce his axe and keep fighting. The dragon's miasma begins to affect Alna. Dias decides to take one final swing before retreating. The blow finally breaks a scale, and in response, the dragon launches fireballs at him. Dias uses the opening to strike its weak point and injures the beast. The dragon gathers energy for a final fireball, aiming at Alna. Dias seizes the moment and strikes the dragon's back, killing it. After that, two villagers searching the mountains for Dias and Alna stumble across them in awkward state and can barely process what they're looking at. When the group returns to the village, the news spreads instantly and everyone is stunned that Dias managed to bring down an earth dragon on his own. The celebration that follows is immediate and loud. Getting the dragon's corpse back to the village turns out to be an ordeal in itself, and by the time they finish transporting the massive body, morning has already broken. Mol finds Dias and tells him flat out that she can't quite believe he pulled it off alone. Dias, unfazed by the praise, gets straight to business and asks whether trading the dragon's remains for a well and a privy is a reasonable exchange. Mol almost laughs. She tells him a single leg of the creature is more than enough to have several of each built, and when Dias asks whether it's really worth that much, she confirms it exceeds anything the village can fully compensate him for. The best they can offer in return is butchering the beast along with his privy, a well, yurt materials, provisions, and medicinal herbs, and they'll even put up a storage yurt for him to keep the leftover materials. Dias is genuinely appreciative. Mol then brings up Alna and suggests he set something aside from the dragon as a wedding gift, adding that her parents would likely be overjoyed to receive a fang or claw. Dias looks confused and asks what marriage has to do with any of this. Mol tells him simply that he's getting married whether he's thought about it or not, and that the village will do whatever it takes to secure a close bond with a neighbor who kills earth dragons for a living. She also points out that even if he somehow avoids marrying Alna, every other eligible woman in the village will be at his door before long given what he's just accomplished. Dias says that sounds like a serious problem. Mol tells him not to worry since Alna has already gone to speak with her parents about the marriage herself. Dias goes quiet for a moment and wonders aloud if that's why he hasn't seen her since they got back, and Mol confirms it. He asks if they're considered engaged now, and Mol explains that Anakin don't have engagement customs the way humans do. Among her people, you simply get married, and the only real choice involved is deciding when it happens. That's about as close to the human concept of engagement as it gets. She also adds that building closer ties through marriage will serve him well if he ever intends to become a proper lord in this region. Dias says he appreciates the concern but admits it catches him off guard and asks why she cares so much about his future. Mol gives him a straightforward answer. If something happens to him, there's no telling what kind of lord might end up taking his place, and that uncertainty is something she'd rather avoid. With that, she leaves him to attend to her own duties. Dias overhears some villagers talking about how much Alna has accomplished even though she is still so young. Curious, he asks them how old she really is. The villagers tell him she just turned 15 and has only recently become old enough to get married. They joke that she already managed to catch someone as impressive as him. Dias is completely shaken after hearing that Alna is only 15. He cannot believe he is expected to marry someone that young when he is already 35 years old enough to be her father. In his own kingdom, people have to be at least 18 before they are allowed to marry. Dias quickly starts making a plan. He decides they can stay engaged for the next 3 years, and during that time he will work on becoming a proper, full-fledged lord. By the end of those 3 years, he hopes he will have found his resolve as both a lord and a man. Just then, Alna calls out to him and happily tells him that their wedding has already been arranged. She then asks what he would like for breakfast the next morning, and Dias tells her that he will gladly eat whatever she makes. The other villagers soon begin congratulating Dias on his marriage to Alna, but he quickly tries to clear things up. He explains that they are only getting engaged and are not actually married yet. The villagers simply laugh and tell him not to be so shy. Sometime after the banquet, the new well and privy that Dias traded materials for are finally completed, and everyone settles back into their normal daily lives. Dias finishes putting up another yurt and looks over his work with satisfaction. He admits that it is not a bad first attempt, but he knows he needs to become much better at building them so his future subjects will not have to sleep outside when they arrive. Then reality suddenly hits him. He does not have a single subject yet. That leaves him wondering what he needs to do to convince people to come and live under his rule. Before he can think about it any longer, Alna calls out to Dias and tells him she has sensed a monster coming from the north. She explains that she has placed a life detection spell over the grasslands, allowing her to sense whenever people or monsters enter the area. Dias asks how many monsters there are, and Alna tells him there is only one. It is not very large, but it is heading straight toward them. Dias has no intention of letting it destroy the well and privy he worked so hard to build, so he decides to hunt it down before it gets any closer. Alna immediately says she will go with him. She explains that even if the monster is small, they should still fight together instead of facing it alone. Dias then asks about the bars. They are sleeping by themselves, and if nobody is there when they wake up, they will become lonely and start crying. Bars that grow attached to people suffer terrible anxiety whenever they are left alone. To solve the problem, Alna asks the villagers who are delivering supplies to Dias to stay behind and watch over the bars while they are gone. Dias and Alna soon find the ogre that Alna detected earlier and hide behind a large rock while watching it. Dias decides they cannot allow it to get any closer to their home, so the two of them rush out together. Alna fires an arrow at the ogre, but it quickly knocks the arrow away before it can hit. At the same time, Dias charges in with his axe, but the ogre is surprisingly fast and easily dodges his attack. Dias rushes at it once again, but the ogre keeps its distance and refuses to let him get close enough to land a clean hit. Alna tells Dias that she is going to slow it down and tells him to keep attacking. She fires another arrow and hits the ogre in the leg, slowing its movement. Taking advantage of the opening, Dias leaps high into the air and swings his axe, cutting straight through the ogre. After the battle, Alna smiles and tells Dias that fighting together was a good idea since they are now married. Dias quickly tries to explain that they are not married yet and are only engaged, but before he can finish, Alna steps back and complains that the ogre's blood smells terrible. She tells him to clean himself before coming back because she is not letting him inside the yurt while he smells like that. With no room to argue, Dias quietly does as he is told. As evening falls, Dias still cannot believe how difficult it is to wash away the horrible smell of ogre blood. Just then, Alna calls out to him with exciting news. She tells him that they are pregnant, and Dias instantly shouts with joy. He rushes over to Françoise, happily pets her, and says he cannot believe she became pregnant so quickly. Seeing this, Francis becomes jealous and starts making noises to get Dias's attention, so Dias laughs and pets him as well. Alna then explains that the news is not completely good. She tells Dias that bears are very intelligent animals. They can fully understand human language and willingly allow themselves to be domesticated because living with people is much safer. However, that intelligence also makes them much more vulnerable to fear and emotional stress, especially when they are pregnant. Sometimes their fear becomes so overwhelming that it can even kill them. To keep them calm until they give birth, the strongest person around must stay close to reassure them. Because of that, Françoise and Francis will have to stay inside the yurt with them. It will be crowded, messy, and smelly, but there is no other choice. Dias simply asks if that is all. He says it does not bother him in the slightest because Françoise and Francis are part of their family. If letting them stay inside means their child will be born safely, then putting up with a little mess is nothing. Hearing those words, Alna tells Dias that he is not only manly but also incredibly kind, and she begins tearing up. A moment later, Alna's horn suddenly begins glowing green. Dias asks if someone is coming, and she confirms that people are approaching from the east. She says they feel like humans. Dias decides to go and meet them himself, but before leaving, he tells Alna to hide herself and the bears with her concealment magic. He assures her that he will be fine and then sprints toward the approaching group. As Dias gets closer, he wonders whether the newcomers are friends or enemies. If they are hostile and carrying bows, they could be dangerous, so he decides to close the distance before they have a chance to attack. Just then, one of the men recognizes him. It is Klaus, one of Dias's old comrades from the war. Klaus greets him warmly, and Dias smiles, saying he is glad to see his old friend safe and healthy. Dias asks what brought him all the way out there, and Klaus explains that he was ordered to act as both a scout and an escort. The real person who wants to meet Dias is the third princess of the kingdom. Klaus then asks Dias to lead them to his manor because everyone is exhausted after traveling for more than half a month. After they arrive at Dias's yurt, the princess formally introduces herself as Diane, the third princess of the kingdom. Dias is surprised that someone so important traveled all the way to see him. Diane looks around and asks whether his manor is still being built because she cannot see any servants. Dias tells her that he does not have a manor or any servants. All he owns is the yurt standing in front of them. He admits it may not look impressive, but he built it himself through hard work. Diane is confused and asks what happened to the craftsman. She believed the king had given Dias a large reward along with enough money to get started. Dias tells her that the king never gave him a single copper coin. Diane can hardly believe what she is hearing. Dias explains that he was abandoned there without any food or water and honestly thought he was going to die. Wanting to get to the point, Dias asks Diane why she came all the way to visit him. She explains that the kingdom is on the verge of war. In the royal capital, more and more people are demanding another conflict, and she has come to ask for his help. As payment, she even offers to marry him herself. Dias refuses without hesitation. He says there is no way he is leaving Françoise behind while she is pregnant. Diane asks if offering even greater rewards would change his mind, but Dias firmly refuses again. He tells them that if that is all they came for, they are free to leave. One of Diane's bodyguards loses his temper. Angry that a commoner keeps rejecting and insulting the princess, he draws his sword and prepares to attack. Before he can even make a move, Dias instantly shatters the sword with ease. He calmly tells them once more to leave, and this time they have no choice but to obey. As they walk away, Diane is clearly frustrated that Dias rejected her offer. She vows that one day she will make him regret his decision. After watching them leave, Dias steps outside, and Alna finally removes the concealment spell. She tells him that while the visitors were there, one person's soul made her horn glow blue, while the others caused it to glow red and white. Dias asks how long she had been watching, and Alna admits that Françoise became anxious because she could not stay close to him. To calm her down, Alna hid herself along with the bears and secretly watched everything from nearby. Dias apologizes to Françoise for leaving her alone and praises Alna for handling the situation so well. He then asks whether the woman who made her horn glow red was hostile toward her. Alna shakes her head and explains that her soul appraisal can now sense whether someone is hostile toward both of them because they are family now. The next morning, Dias wakes up to the smell of breakfast as Alna prepares the morning meal. Suddenly, Alna's horn begins glowing green again. She tells Dias that another human is approaching. Dias wonders if it is just a traveler who lost their way, so he decides to go and check. Before leaving, he asks Alna if she is coming with him. Alna says it should not be a problem since there is only one person. She plans to use her concealment magic because she does not want Françoise and Francis to become anxious again after being separated from them. Dias agrees, and the two of them head out. Before long, Dias spots the approaching person and realizes it is Klaus. He calls out to him, and Klaus is relieved that Dias found him because he had been searching for Dias's home but got completely lost. Dias asks why Klaus did not return to the capital, and he also notices that Klaus is no longer wearing his armor. Klaus then reveals that he has been dismissed from military service. They took away both his sword and his armor. Dias immediately worries that Klaus lost his position because of what happened with Princess Diane, but Klaus quickly reassures him that it was not his fault. He explains that if another war broke out, they would have sent him straight to the front lines, and he had no desire to fight in another pointless war. Because of that, he deliberately made sure he would be dismissed from the army. Klaus then asks Dias if he can work for him instead as his personal soldier. Alna says she has no objections to the idea. Hearing her voice, Klaus is completely shocked and asks where Alna and the two bears suddenly came from. Dias smiles and tells him it is a long story. Instead of explaining everything right there, He tells Klaus to follow him back first. It has been 10 days since Klaus went to Dias's kingdom, and Dias helped him build a new yurt for his own use. He also gave him a spear and armor, both made from dragon materials. Klaus is happy that Dias gave him gifts that not even royalty could obtain, and he feels that he must honor his trust. Alna tells Dias and Klaus that she made herb-roasted black ghee. Klaus tastes it and tells Alna that she will make a fine wife in the future, but Dias breaks into a sweat, and Klaus is confused why. Alna brings out more roasted black ghee and tells Klaus to have more. Klaus thanks her and tells Dias to join him, but Dias tells Klaus that being called Lord is never going to sound right to him. Even so, Klaus says that he must do it in order to make their positions clear. The bears make sounds, and Alna translates for them. The bears tell Klaus that they contribute to the herd by providing wool, and he should be a man who is useful too. Klaus tells them that, as the captain of the domain's forces, he will make sure to do his best to live up to Francis's expectations. Klaus is currently the entirety of the domain's armed forces, but Dias thinks that enthusiasm makes up for the rest. Alna's horn shines a bright green color, and she tells Dias that 12 humans are heading their way from the east, but one of them appears to be on the verge of death. Dias decides to go and inspect it before it is too late. Klaus asks whether he should accompany Dias, but Dias refuses and tells him that he should protect the house. If anything seems off about them, he will send Alna and the bars back home, and at that point he would want Klaus to protect everyone there. Klaus assures Dias that he can count on him, and Alna uses concealment magic on Dias and the bears. Right now in the city, the 5 princes and princesses are in the grips of a succession dispute, and Princess Diane from the other day has less military might than her siblings' factions, so Klaus is sure that she was trying to court Dias. The fact that Dias never received his reward must be because of the second prince, who is said to be a money grubber. The nobility is split into factions, and the effects of their bickering and schemes are felt even out on the frontier. Someday the conflict itself may make its way into Dias's domain, but Klaus thinks that to fight and die in Dias's service wouldn't be so bad. Klaus notices Dias carrying an old woman on his back with some people behind him. Klaus asks Dias what happened, and he explains that there was a rebellion in a neighboring domain, leading a poor village to expel the elderly woman so they would have fewer people to feed. Klaus guesses that it is probably the Kazdecs. He passed through it on the way to Dias's domain, and they were in dire straits. Dias is impressed with the women because the elderly woman, who is their leader, managed to use her fortune-telling skills to find a way to survive the whole situation, which is how they ended up there. Klaus is happy that he has made 12 new subjects all at once. Dias decides to start building tents for the refugees, but Klaus tells Dias to treat the refugees as he sees fit because they won't contribute much. However, it completely goes over his head, and Dias tells Klaus that it is another way they are amazing. All the ladies are over 70, and Maya is 90, so he hopes that they can teach him the secret to a long life. Alna tells Klaus that she agrees with him since he is the Lord, and the bars agree that they should abide by his decisions since he is the strongest of the herd after all. Klaus realizes that he can't change Dias's mind because he has been like that since back when Dias was still in the army and the war was going on. The captain of the army tells everyone to withdraw because they cannot win the fight, but Klaus asks him if they are really going to run without fighting while there is a large enemy force right on their doorstep, and who is going to protect the citizens still in the evacuation shelter. The captain tells Klaus to be quiet and orders the rest of the team to retreat. Klaus yells at them that they call themselves soldiers of the kingdom, yet abandon the citizens. Klaus hears the sound of a person approaching and wonders if that is where he is going to die, but it is just Dias holding a small boy whom he had heard crying before and went to get from the shelter. Dias hands the small boy over to the citizens and promises to protect him. The enemies start charging straight at Dias and Klaus, and Dias tells Klaus that he should not die on him. Klaus doesn't remember clearly what happened after that, but he only thought of keeping the enemy away from the shelter and how he was going to help Dias fight off the enemies. He was sure it was the best strategy he had in that fight. He is very sure now that Dias hasn't changed, not even now as a domain lord. Klaus calls himself a fool for thinking that he would be great and honorable by dying. He needs to live and give Dias his support as he is earnestly trying to become a great lord. Maya thanks Dias for building a meeting place, and they tell him that they will use the space to work as well. They say that when the bar's wool piles up, they will spin yarn and make cloth, and Dias thinks it will be helpful, but then his facial expression changes. One of the refugees asks him why he made a grave face, and he tells them that with more people there, he was thinking of declaring that place a village, but he can't think of a good name. One of the refugees suggests that he name it Dias Village, but he refuses because he can't name the village after himself. Klaus suggests naming it Dragon Slayer Village, but Alna rejects it, and instead, she suggests that they name it Iluk Village. She explains that Iluk means first village in the ancient tongue. Nobody objects to the idea, and Diaz agrees to name the village Iluk Village. Alna tells Diaz that now that they have a village, they need more subjects. Diaz tries to remember what Maya suggested, and Maya appears right behind him. Diaz gets visibly scared since he had not said a single thing out loud. Maya tells him that, regarding the matter they were discussing earlier, if he wants more subjects, he can sell those dragon materials and buy slaves. However, Diaz tells her that he hates slavery and that he saw enslaved soldiers on the battlefield many times, and they were all treated horribly. He intends to prohibit the owning and selling of slaves within his domain. Maya sighs in relief and tells him that she doesn't like slavery either, but Diaz is confused and asks her why she told him to get slaves then. She explains that she wanted to know how he really felt about slavery, and if he had been on board with it, she would have steered him away. She asks Diaz to forgive her, but there are many tragic tales from their land. Diaz asks whether she is talking about the Kazdeks, and she replies yes. The Lord and his eldest son enjoy hunting down slaves, and his second son, the one who picked a fight with them, is said to have many female slaves attend to him. Diaz tells her that his domain and Iluk village ain't going down that road, and that he won't allow it. A traveling merchant comes by the Onikin village periodically, and Alna sent word for him to swing by their domain as well. Klaus wonders what he looks like, and Diaz is shocked to see that he is a frog. The frog hops down from the carriage and tells them that his name is Pajan Du and that they should do some nice business together. Alna tells them that he is a member of the frogkin race. Pajan asks them whether he can take a look at the earth dragon materials. Diaz drops them on the ground and Pajan yells in shock, expecting Diaz to show him something smaller. Pajan asks Diaz whether he really killed the dragon by himself, and Diaz thinks that Pajan wants to know whether his trading partner is lying to him, so he demonstrates by cutting the material into 2 pieces. Pajan is even more shocked. Diaz asks whether Pajan believes him now, and Pajan agrees and tells him he is happy to trade with him. Pajan tells his guards to start unloading all the goods, and after checking, he is glad he brought enough goods to trade with. Pajan decides it is a good time to bring out a surprise. He tells Diaz that he couldn't offload the slaves in the Beastkin nation, but since Diaz is a human, he thinks he would take them. Diaz gets visibly angry at Pajan for selling slaves, and he notices that the light in their eyes is gone, which means they are also orphans like himself. Before Diaz could do anything rash, Alna holds his hand and tells him to calm down. Maya tells him not to make such a scary face in front of the children. Maya tells Pajan that they do not wish to buy slaves, but Pajan tries to explain that they have it all wrong and that the 2 aren't slaves. If he had not taken them as merchandise, they would have been dead. In the village where the 2 children were born, the villagers shunned them and said that they would bring calamity, and they were going to execute them. Their parents took them and ran away from the village, and that's around the time Pajan made their acquaintance. However, it was more than the parents could handle, and they both fell ill. They knew their days were numbered, so they asked Pajan to look after the girls, but Pajan said no since he does not do charity work. The parents paid Pajan and told him that he could take them as merchandise, but all the money they gave him then is gone, and the twins are making him go broke, so he begs Diaz to take them. Diaz agrees and tells him that he will take custody of the twins and will pay in materials to cover what he has spent supporting them. Diaz picks them up and asks how old they are and what games they like to play, but they do not respond. Diaz continues to ask them questions but gets no response, so he thinks they don't have names and decides to name them himself. Then they speak up and tell him that they don't want new names. He uses the opportunity to ask for their names, and they tell him that their names are Senai and Ihan. Diaz tells both of them that he would like them to take a bath with their new big sister, Alna, and change their clothes, and they agree. Maya tells them that afterward they will have steamed potatoes, and Klaus tells Diaz good job for getting their names. Diaz tells him that they wanted to protect the names that their beloved parents gave them. Klaus is surprised by how good Diaz is with children, and Diaz tells him that before the war he was sort of a father figure to the other orphans, and he hopes all of them are doing well. Alna brings Senai and Ihan to Diaz, and Diaz doesn't expect them to open up to him so suddenly, so he calls them by name and compliments their new clothes. Maya knows that they aren't human children, but she feels like they will be good for the domain. She will watch and see what happens. Alna gives Senai and Ihan jewels and explains the meaning of their names. Senai means one who is beautiful like the moon, and Ihan means the holy moon. Alna tells them that their parents must have had a deep attachment to the moon, and that is why she gave them the Ahai jewels. It is said that the power of the moon is hidden within them. The girls remember their parents and start crying. Diaz tells them that they have both been so brave since they left their beloved parents, but they don't need to hold back anymore. And when they feel like crying, they should go ahead. Dias asks Alna what the ancient tongue she mentioned is, and Alna explains that it is an ancient language that exists only in legends. No one uses it now, and she doesn't know if it is purely an Oni kin tradition, but the two children don't seem to be human. She tells Dias that it is possible their people once had contact with the Oni kin. On that day, Iluk village grew a lot livelier and more boisterous, and then 10 days later, Sene and Ihan are fighting because Sene ate Ihan's potato. Ihan says she is sorry, but Senai tells her that she was saving it for later. Dias tries to give Senai his potato, but Senai doesn't want it. Alna's horn lights up green, and she tells Dias that it is a lone human on a horse from the east. Dias decides to go and check it out, and Senai and Ihan tell Dias to come back home soon. Dias assures them that he will. Dias sees the person, and Alna tells him that the person came up white on her horn, which means he has no hostility toward them. The person gets off the horse and introduces himself as Kamalats. He serves Eldon Kazdix, the new lord of the Kazdix domain. He tells Dias that Eldon wishes to have a meeting with him and is on his way as they speak. Kamalats asks if he can receive him at his manor, but Dias refuses and tells him that he will meet him right there. Kamalats leaves to tell Eldon the information, and Dias thinks that since there is a new lord, it means that Alna's rebellion was successful. Dias is not letting anyone surrounded by enslaved women near Iluk village. Dias sees the new lord of the Kazdix domain approaching, and he remembers Maya told him that Eldon is said to have many female slaves to attend to him. The whole idea of slavery infuriates Dias, so he grips his axe tightly out of anger and says that he is not going to let a guy that keeps slaves anywhere near Iluk village. Alna tells Dias that Eldon is shining a blue color. It is not as intense as Dias' own, but it is still pretty strong, and no one accompanying him is red. Eldon gets off the carriage and runs towards Dias and apologizes for coming to him, but he tells Dias that he had to meet the man who he admires for himself and introduces himself. Ever since Eldon was a child, he has had utmost respect for the kingdom's heroic savior, and he got it in his head that he should be on good terms with him. But he promises to not do anything wrong, and he hopes that Dias isn't upset. Dias tells him that he isn't upset, and he apologizes to Kamalats for his rude treatment before. Eldon tells Dias that there is no reason to fret over rudeness, and he is more than welcome to dispense with formalities with them. Eldon asks Dias who the woman standing beside him is, and both Dias and Alna are shocked that he was able to notice her. Eldon tells Dias that she is very good at hiding, but his ears and nose are keen, so he knows that she is there. He says that Alna has a nice, kind scent, just like Dias, but Dias is more shocked by the fact that concealment doesn't work on him. Alna reveals herself, and Eldon is shocked to see that Alna has a horn on her head, and he asks her what her people are. He turns to Dias next and asks him what his relationship with her is, and Dias explains to Eldon that her name is Alna and she is his fiancée. But Alna corrects him by saying that she is his wife. Eldon looks at the horn and asks her whether she is a demi-human, and she tells him that she is an Onikin and she was born with the horn on her head. She has never heard the word demi-human, so she does not know how to answer. Eldon explains that demi-human is a general term that is used for people who are not human but are similar to them, and they vary, such as beastkin and fishkin. Alna answers that if what he is saying is right, then she is indeed a demi-human. Eldon's eyes get watery and he starts crying. Eldon asks Dias whether he has had a child with Alma, but Dias tells him to stop crying and that he does not have any children with Alma. However, Alma says that she plans to have 10 children with Dias, and Dias is shocked that she would even say something like that. Alma explains that they do not have any children of their own yet, but Dias is raising 2 orphans who appear to be demi-humans. Eldon is shocked to hear that Dias has a demi-human wife and demi-human children and cries even harder than before. Eldon's facial features start changing, and his ears and nose grow into those of an elephant. He yells that he has finally found a comrade and that it is none other than Dias while picking him up with his trunk. Dias is surprised and asks Eldon whether he is a demi-human too, but Eldon falls to the ground in pain while sweating heavily, and Dias asks him whether he is okay. In the carriage, Eldon is lying down while Dias asks Kamalats what is going on with him. Eldon tells Kamalats that he doesn't mind if he tells Dias the truth. Kamalats explains to Dias that Eldon is a half demi-human, born to a demi-human and a human, and he can assume any form that he wishes to take, but the shift between each form is quite taxing. Half demi-humans are rare, and being one is an advantage for Eldon. However, not having a single stable form poses some difficulties for Eldon, and that is why he cannot do without the devoted care of his wives. Eldon sits up and tells Dias that he was so delighted to hear that he was married to a demi-human that, in his excitement, he changed form in spite of himself. Dias tells him not to worry about it, and Dias asks about the rebellion that happened earlier. Eldon tells him that he did it to protect the people who were dear to him. It all began when Eldon was born. The previous lord, named Enkars, already had a wife and son, but his eldest son's personality was just as bad as his. Enkars alienated the eldest son, who was so similar to himself, while he was highly fond of his bright, handsome son born from an elephant-kin slave. The lord declared him his true son, and awarded the boy position and authority, and that son was Eldon. Until Eldon was 5 years old, he thought that he was a regular human, but a random occurrence revealed the real him, and he learned that his true mother was kept as a slave. So, starting then, Eldon secretly got to know his mother better, and he worked behind the scenes to safeguard demi-humans, all while keeping it away from Enkars, who would sooner have them in chains. Eldon wants to make a world where everyone can live in happiness. Enkars' wives were all slaves, but Eldon saved them, and because they were inspired by his ideals, they decided to become his caretakers. Alna asks Camelot about all the talk of the Lord's second son being attended by a bevy of enslaved women, and Camelot explains that it was a rumor they spread intentionally, but in fact, Eldon and his wives love each other with all their hearts. However, the deception was not easy to maintain, and Enkars was enraged when he learned of Eldon's true goal. So he declared that he would put every last demi-human in the domain to death, including Eldon and his mother. But Eldon raised an army to protect the demi-humans, and after a hard-fought conflict, he defeated Enkars' forces. Dias now understands what Eldon meant by protecting those dear to him, and Eldon apologizes for forgetting himself in his excitement earlier. But when he heard that the hero has a demi-human family, he thought that Dias must be a kindred spirit with the same dream. Dias asks him whether the hero he is referring to is him, and Eldon tells him yes, and that he is the heroic savior of the kingdom who made his way to the Kazdaks. He upholds his parents' dying wish and rescues the weak, cuts down thousands of foes, and uses his fists to persuade tyrannical nobles to reform. Camelot tells Dias that his heroic saga has been performed as a stage play in the capital to lift morale and recruit volunteer soldiers. Apparently, public performances were suspended as soon as the aristocracy intervened, but the tale was told by word of mouth, and now everyone knows his story. This is the first time that Dias is hearing of it, but he bets that the bulk of the story is entirely made up. Eldon doesn't believe every single thing he has heard, but he hears returning soldiers talk, and his reputation increases. Now that Eldon has met Dias, he says that Dias exceeds the tales, so Eldon hopes they can be on good terms and work towards a world where demi-humans and humans live together in harmony. Dias tells Eldon that he supports the dream, and in his village, humans and demi-humans already coexist in peace. He also thinks that it would be good to see that in more places, so he tells Eldon that he would very much like Eldon and his people to be their friends. Eldon's eyes start getting watery, and Dias tells him that his ideals are truly commendable. Dias thinks that he can afford to take more pride in them, so he should not be ashamed, and Eldon starts crying uncontrollably. Dias and Eldon have a grasp on the situation of each other's domain, and Dias tells Eldon that he told a traveling merchant to spread the word about his domain to get more subjects, but Dias still asks Eldon whether he has any other suggestions. Eldon tells him that he will spread the word in Kazdaks as well, but there is something he should do first. Eldon thinks that he will be in trouble if he doesn't amass larger food stores and tells him that he must begin producing food within his domain, especially if he plans to have more subjects come in. Winter seems far away, but it could sneak up on them. If they don't prepare now, they will regret it later, and Dias thanks him for the advice. Eldon tells him that he plans to be as helpful as possible to Dias, and he sets off. As Dias arrives back home, Senai and Ahan use cursed speech on him and tell him that they waited for him for so long and he lied that he would be back soon. After Senai and Ahan fall asleep, Alna asks Dias whether he is sure that he shouldn't have scolded them because they hit and kicked Dias. They even insisted on staying up late because he lied. Dias thinks it's not good behavior, but he lets it go because he is the one who broke the promise and he wanted to start apologizing. It is common for children who just join a family to speak willfully and be wild in order to test the adults, but Dias says that if it continues, then he will be forced to set them straight. Dias talks to Alna about the food production situation as Eldon pointed out earlier, and he tells her that he will start cultivating a field. He explains that he did a lot of farm work before the war, so he would like to think that he is used to it. Alma's horn starts shining green, and she tells Dias that it is an intruder, but he asks her whether she is sure that it is not just Eldon and his people. She replies that the intruders are coming from a different direction than the way Eldon left, and that no one respectable would be wandering around at night. Dias thinks that it has to be bandits and decides to go and take a look, but Alna says that she is following him too. Alna asks him how he is possibly going to find them without any help and passes the duty to Klaus to hold down the fort while they are out. The bandits are searching and wonder whether any humans are really in the fields. They haven't even seen a single tree around. One of them tells them they are going the right way and complains that he spent a lot of money hiring them, and if they are only good for running their mouths, they can return his money immediately. But they tell him that there is no need to worry and they will do the job right. They ask him why they have to do it on a night with no moon, and he asks them whether they have not heard of Dias, the kingdom's heroic savior. They would never beat him head-on in broad daylight, and if they fail to take him by surprise, they won't even stand a chance against him. But they think that it is just fake rumors, and they think that there is no possible way that they can lose with so many fighters. The person that hired them tells them that they should not dare talk back to him, and if they find Eldon, they should kill him too. They ask whether he is going to pay extra for killing Eldon, and he says that he will pay them 100 silver coins for Eldon and a bonus of 10 gold coins for Dias. The leader of the bandit group tells his men to be ready since it is their first big deal in a while. Before they can finish, an arrow is sent their way and pierces one of the bandits' men. More arrows are sent their way, and the leader tells them to discard the torches and fire at the red light ahead. The red light flies away, and the leader wonders what it is. More arrows are fired at them, and the leader thinks that the arrows are way too accurate for so few shots fired and wonders how the person can tell where they are. The leader tells them to keep firing their arrows and that they can win if the enemies come out. Alna whines in pain, and the leader of the bandit group hears her and tells them to surround the area. All of them charge, but Dias rushes in and knocks 2 guys to the ground with his axe. The leader is shocked to see his men getting wiped out by 1 guy. He sees a green light and wonders whether it is a demi-human and yells for it to come out. Dias ambushes him and breaks his sword, then immediately kicks him away. The leader thinks that even getting paid 100 gold coins isn't enough to make them fight Dias. The person that hired them ran away, and his injury starts hurting him. Back when Dias was in the city, Dias, as a commoner, got angry at him and stepped on his balls, and he swears to get revenge on Dias. Dias is lecturing the bandits that they made a foolish decision by trying to kill them. Alna tells them to leave as punishment, and Alna thinks that it wasn't really a punishment. Alna is glad that they managed to get so many weapons from them, and Dias asks whether beat-up weapons will fetch a price. Alna tells him that steel is precious in prayer. Alna and Dias talk about the way they met each other as they are heading home, and she uses concealment to get close to Dias, pecks Dias on the cheek, and runs away in embarrassment. Dias goes to tell Mole that he wants to cultivate fields on the grasslands. He already discussed it with Alna, but she told him that everyone in her village has always said crops can't be grown there. Dias asks how they get their medicinal herbs then, and Alna explains that they grow them as potted plants. She doesn't know how to do it herself, though, and thinks Mole would. Mole confirms this and tells Dias that crops can't grow on those plains, but Dias says that all he needs is for her to explain how to grow potted plants. Even if farming turns out to be difficult, he would rather give it a try than sit around doing nothing. Mole tells Dias to crush verdant leaf stones together with animal bones and mix the powder into the soil. She says that it works well for potted medicinal herbs, but not for vegetables. They have tried planting fields the same way before, but it never seems to work. Dias asks what the difference between medicinal herbs and vegetables is because, to him, they all just look like different kinds of grass. Mole admits that she doesn't know the difference herself, but she thinks the forest kin would. The forest kin are people who know everything about forests, plants, and farming. The stories say that with a single wave of their hand, they can turn any wasteland into fertile land overflowing with greenery. Mole has never actually seen one before, though, so she isn't even sure they really exist. Still, she promises to help Dias however she can with cultivating the fields, and if it succeeds, she wants him to teach her how he did it since she also wants a more stable food supply. Dias tells her that was his plan from the very beginning, and if everything works out, he will bring her potatoes. Mole says she has high hopes for both the potatoes and for Dias having children with Alna, but Dias doesn't want to end up in the Epstein files and tells her there is no need. When Dias returns home, the girls immediately run over to welcome him back. They notice the bag he is carrying and excitedly ask if he brought them anything. Dias sets it down and proudly shows them the stones he collected, expecting them to be amazed by how shiny they are, but the children look completely disappointed instead. They tell him it's just a big bag of rocks and that it's boring. Francis and Francoise tell the children that they want to play with them, but the children tell them to go play somewhere else instead. Dias is left completely embarrassed by the whole situation. Alna comes up behind him to welcome him home, notices the rocks, and asks what they are. Dias says they look like beautiful gemstones to him. Alna remembers that Dias can't sense magical energy at all and explains that if he could use magic, he would immediately know those stones contain no magical energy whatsoever. Without magical energy, no matter how pretty they look, they're nothing more than ordinary rocks. Dias already knows that Alna can sense magical energy, but he wonders if the children can sense it too. Alna tells him that, for their age, both of them are unusually talented at sensing magical energy. Sometimes they even notice faint traces that she herself can't detect. If they seriously devote themselves to learning magic, their abilities might one day surpass even the chieftains. Dias is surprised to hear that and says that no matter what path they choose in life, he is sure they have a bright future ahead of them. Dias begins grinding the verdant leaf stones, saying that since he can't sense magical energy anyway, he might as well start preparing the fields. Before he can get very far, Alma suddenly tells him that she senses people approaching from the east. There are multiple people, horses, and several other things she can't quite identify. Dias decides to go investigate, and Alna insists on coming with him since she can't let him go alone when they don't know who they're dealing with. Dias thanks her, and the two set off together. As they run, Alna says they'll come into view soon and tells Dias they should stop. Dias uses the scope to get a better look and realizes that Camelot is driving the lead carriage. He excitedly tells Alna, but she tells him not to be so dramatic when it's someone they already know. Dias then asks what the creatures pulling the wagons are, and Alna explains that they're white geese. Those were the strange creatures she sensed earlier. Dias says that although their coloring is different, they still look enough like black geese to be easy to remember. A moment later, Alna notices something moving inside one of the wagons, and Dias decides he'll ask Camelot about it later. Inside the wagon, a rat sighs in relief. He says that after getting caught during the slave hunt, he wasn't sure what would happen to him, but he's grateful he managed to sneak aboard a wagon heading for the desert. Just then, the other rats immediately yell at him, telling him the wagon isn't heading anywhere near the desert. They mock him by saying that even though he's smart enough to read, he's still an idiot. The frightened rat says they should get off immediately, but the others explain that they never intended to return home. Instead, they're planning to kill the dragon slayer. They'll defeat Dias, the man who killed a dragon, and prove just how mighty the desert folk really are. The rat complains that she only climbed aboard because she thought they actually had a plan to return home, and besides, Dias is even stronger than a dragon. The other rats, however, are convinced they're superior to humans and believe they'll defeat Dias, then force him to find them a way back to the desert. Camelot climbs down from the carriage and thanks Dias and Alna for coming out to meet him personally. He explains that he's delivering everything Lord Eldon promised him. Hidden inside the wagon, the rats prepare to ambush Dias the moment he gets close. One of them accidentally kicks the frightened rat, causing him to fall over with a loud squeak that catches Dias' attention. As soon as Dias approaches the wagon, every rat bursts out at once and launches a surprise attack. Alna immediately blocks every strike and protects Dias. The rats quickly retreat before trying to ambush Alna instead, but while charging at her, they insult her. Dias instantly knocks them all down and declares that Alna is a wonderful woman and he won't allow anyone to insult her. Alna is completely caught off guard by what he says and can't stop herself from blushing. Camelot orders his guards to protect Dias and Alna while capturing every last rat. Once they've rounded them all up, Camelot apologizes repeatedly, saying he doesn't know how he'll ever make up for what happened. Dias tells him there's no need, but Camelot insists because the rats are his subjects, and it would reflect poorly on him if he did nothing. Dias is surprised to hear that they're actually his subjects. Camelot explains that although they look like ordinary animals, any race with its own language and culture is considered beast kin. These particular ones belong to the big-eared hopping mouse kin, although they insist on being called the desert folk. They come from the desert beyond the kingdom's southern border, where slave hunts were carried out. Lord Eldon rescued them and promised to find a way to send them home, but instead of showing gratitude, they caused trouble. Dias decides to leave their punishment entirely to Camelot. He repeats that Camelot doesn't owe him anything, but if it helps him feel better, he'll accept whatever apology he wishes to offer. Camelot thanks Dias before handing him a letter from Eldon. In it, Eldon explains that alongside the farming equipment he promised, he also included spices and several specialties from his own territory because he thought Dias would enjoy them. He also gifted Dias the horses that delivered everything in the hope that they could continue trading and corresponding in the future. He says he's looking forward to seeing Dias again. Dias is stunned that Eldon is giving him all of this for free and immediately feels indebted to him. Camelot then surprises him even further by explaining that Eldon also sent the materials needed to build a stable, and Dias won't even have to worry about constructing it because his men will handle everything themselves. Alan excitedly asks Dias if they really get to keep the horses, and Dias happily confirms it. Alan rushes over to pet them while thanking Dias over and over. Alna, on the other hand, gets so excited that she throws her arms around Diaz and nearly chokes him with an overly enthusiastic hug. She explains that her family was never wealthy, and ever since she was little, she dreamed of having a family that owned a horse. She always hoped that because Diaz is such a dependable man, he would eventually get one, but she never imagined it would happen this soon. Diaz asks why her family struggled financially, and Alna bluntly says it was because her older brother was useless. Embarrassed by how tightly she hugged him, she apologizes and asks if he's angry. Diaz tells her that if anyone else had done that, he probably would have been upset, but because it's her, he doesn't mind. It was just a little embarrassing, so he asks her to tone it down whenever other people are around, and she happily agrees. Klaus is amazed by the white geese. He says they're incredible because they can turn over the soil without even cutting the grass. He nearly loses control of the plow, but Maya quickly reminds him to keep a firm grip on the handles. Once they're finished plowing, everyone agrees to let the soil rest for about 3 days before planting any seeds. Maya explains that back in her village, they used wood ash to keep the soil healthy, and she suggests building a cistern since the nearby stream isn't very large and they might need extra water during dry summers. Klaus proudly says that he dug holes throughout the war, so he's very experienced. Diaz jokingly asks if he wants to build one together for old time's sake, and Klaus happily agrees. Before they can begin, Ihan and Senai come looking for Diaz and ask if he's finished farming yet. Diaz tells them it will still take several more weeks. He asks if they needed something. And after exchanging nervous glances, the children simply tell him that the food is ready and Alna asks them to bring him home. Diaz is surprised they walked all the way out there just to deliver the message. As he carries them back, he notices they're acting strangely and wonders what's wrong. The children quietly ask if farming is difficult, and Diaz tells them it really isn't. They then ask if he would be sad if they kept a secret from him. Diaz says that if it's a bad secret, then yes, he might be sad, but if it isn't, then he won't be. Hearing that, Ihan and Senai suddenly jump out of his arms and continue walking toward the house. Diaz keeps asking why they ask those questions, but neither child answers him, nor do they mention anything to Alna. After a few days, they return to their usual cheerful selves, and Diaz gradually forgets about the entire conversation. Once the 3 days have passed, Alan brings Diaz some seeds and explains that they're the seeds of a fast-growing medicinal Yenoshi herb, which usually sprouts the very next day. Diaz leaves to check on the stable and is shocked to discover that the entire structure has already been completed in only 3 days. Kamalats explains that they simply used prefabricated materials that only needed to be assembled. Grateful for everything they've done, Diaz offers Kamalats several dragon parts as thanks, but everyone immediately protests that the gift is far too valuable. Diaz eventually convinces them to accept it by claiming he'll simply leave the materials in their care to use for his benefit later. As Kamalats prepares to leave, Ihan and Senai begin crying. Alna tells them they can't stay inside crying forever just because they'll miss him. Once they're finished crying, they still have to take care of the horses because if they don't, the horses will start crying too. The girls immediately wipe away their tears and rush off to look after them. Diaz heads back to check on the fields, only to discover that none of the plants have sprouted. Instead of getting discouraged, he decides to try again, because not everything succeeds on the first attempt. The next day he finds exactly the same result, so he wonders if he simply didn't use enough verdant leaf stone and adds more. When nothing grows the following day either, he prepares to add even more, but Alna stops him. She tells him that using too much will actually damage the soil and gently reminds him that crops simply can't grow on the grasslands. Ihan and Senai witness Diaz's disappointment and begin wondering what they can do to help him. As they think about it, they suddenly hear a stranger calling out for help. Curious, they follow the voice until they arrive at a wooden box. The moment the rat inside realizes someone is nearby, he immediately cries out and begs them to save him. Senai asks Ihan to help her move the box because it is too heavy for her to move on her own, and Ihan agrees to help her. The rat starts crying and thanks them when they open the box. She tells them that she has been inside the box for a very long time and she owes the two of them her life. Ihan and Senai both introduce themselves to the rat, and they ask the rat for her name. She tells them that her name is Amber Jerry Bauer and she is part of the big-eared hopping mouse kin. It might not be obvious, but she is a grown woman. Ihan compliments the rat's glasses and tells her that they look good on her. The rat tells her that she made them herself, and she also shows them that she made a book for studying purposes, and they are amazed. They ask the rat how she got stuck in the box, and the rat tells them that when her people were trying to attack Diaz, she got dragged into the whole mess. They ask her whether she is a friend of Diaz, but she tells them that she has never even spoken to him because she hasn't gotten out of the box since she arrived. Senai and Ihan look at each other. then ask the rat for advice but tell her that it is a secret that Dias and the others must not find out. After they finish telling the rat the secret, the rat wants to clarify and asks them whether they are both from a tribe called the Forest Kin, and they agree. The Forest Kin live in the forest, protect it, and become part of it. They open their pendants and show the rat a seed. They explain that when a Forest Kin is about to die, they put their strength and knowledge into a seed, and they entrust that seed to someone close to them. The person they entrusted the seed to will protect and nurture the seed, thus creating a forest. When the tree is grown, it is like a gravestone, and touching it connects you with the feelings of the departed. It is also like a book that can be used to gain knowledge. They are really family trees in more ways than one, and the Forest Kin protect these trees by giving them their magical power so that they can make plants grow faster and create barriers to ward off disease and miasma. Senai says that because they have not grown up yet, they can only get plants to sprout and make little barriers, but they are not allowed to tell humans about it. It was the last promise they made to their father and mother. They told them not to let anyone see their powers because humans would misuse them if they found out. The rat agrees that humans would probably misuse their powers but asks them why they are living with humans, and they tell the rat that they had to keep their promise. So they thought about running away at first. But they stayed because of how kind Dias is and because he reminded them of their father and mother. They also tell the rat that because of how nice everyone has been to them, they decided to live there with them. Dias is working really hard every day to cultivate a field, but the Earth's power is getting sucked away there, and it needs a barrier to stop that from happening. Even if Dias found out about their powers, they don't think that Dias would misuse them, but they made a promise to their parents, and they don't want to break the promise. The rat asks them whether they want to put up a barrier without somehow getting found out, and they agree. The rat tells them to do it late at night when everyone is asleep, but they tell the rat that they can't because they also sleep at night. But the rat says that she will wake them up and take them there because she has good night vision and she can lead them there in the dark. Senai and Ihan are glad that they talked to her, but the rat tells them not to get too excited or they will be found out. Once night falls, the mouse is drinking water and says that she feels alive again because she has not drunk water since she arrived. She hops towards the tent and finds the careless tear that Senai and Ihan told her about. She squeezes her body through the hole and sees everyone sleeping peacefully. She notices Dias and decides to go around him so that she does not wake him up, but as she is about to go past him, a strong stench hits her nose and she nearly blows her cover. She now understands the bad smell that Senai and Ihan were talking about. As she continues moving, she reaches Senai and Ihan and tries to wake them up. She tells them that if they don't get up now, then they won't have the chance to do it later because it will be morning by then. Once Senai and Ain get up, they go outside and walk a few steps, but stop, and the rat asks them what the problem is. They tell the rat that it is dark and scary, but the rat asks them what they usually do if they have to relieve themselves at night. The rat says that the situation they are in is a big problem because she is not enough to reassure them, but Senai and Ihan pull out the seeds from their necklaces and call upon their father and mother to give them courage, and when they have gathered enough courage, they hold each other's hands and start walking towards the farm. After they reach the farm, they ask the rat to give them a minute so that they can start the incantation for the barrier. They go into the middle of the field and start reciting the incantation so that they can put up the barrier. After they have finished making the barrier, they carry the rat on their hand to take her back to the house, and the rat says that her work there is done, but she doesn't expect them to take her into their tent and asks them to let her go or the rest of the family will find her. But by the time she asks them, they have already fallen asleep and she starts panicking. In the Kazdek's domain, some people in a bar are chatting about how Eldon is going to the royal capital to present the king with an earth dragon magic stone that he got from the dragon slayer, and they say that will boost his reputation by a lot and it might even make him officially be recognized as the domain lord. If that happens, Kazdeks will continue to get safer and safer from then on. One of them says that they heard a rumor that the dragon slayer has a demi-human wife and the two of them are so in love that they don't shy away from showing it. And the wolf demi-human confirms it by saying that his brother is one of Kamalatz's guards and his brother told him. The deer demi-human says that the dragon slayer is from the east and Easterners are known for hating on demi-humans, so they wonder why he is married to a demi-human. The wolf demi-human says that he thinks the dragon slayer's wife is horned, and the lion demi-human guesses and says that his wife has to be a rhino kin. They think that a human marrying a rhino kin is crazy. People in the city have been hearing that Dias is looking for new subjects, and he's accepting all people except bad guys or criminals, and Dias is even offering food and housing. The wolf demi-human says that he saw several dog kin standing there staring at the sign. The lion demi-human says that apparently someone manipulated those big-eared hopping mouse kin to try and attack Dias, and the mouse kin are claiming that it was the monkey kin that told them to do it, But the wolf demi-human says that it sounds like a story that the mousekin made up to avoid taking responsibility, and that is how it seemed. But others have come forward, saying that they were hit up by a monkey-kin dressed in all dark clothing. As the guy in the red cloak leaves the bar, he walks into an alley and then he removes his cloak and says that he was only able to fool the mice, but they failed miserably. A totally normal woman with no ill intention comes up to him and asks him whether he wants to have fun, but he grabs her head and tells her to get lost. Two knights are talking about how Kazdex has a new lord and it is going to make things harder for the second prince, Miser. The previous lord of Kazdex was controlling the west, and Miser was getting rich off of it. Losing the previous lord will be a hard blow to Miser. Eldon is trying to distance himself from Miser, so they are wondering whether the crown will fall on the first prince named Richard or the three princesses, but they don't think the youngest princess, Diane, has any chance. Another knight rushes in to inform them that Diane has left the royal capital with a large group of soldiers, but they tell them not to worry because it's probably just her usual. He tells them that it's not her normal amount, but instead it is around 200 troops, and she also had dozens of wagons laden with provisions, and he wonders whether war has broken out, but they tell him that it's someone else's problem and not theirs. In the morning, Alna wakes up, and when she sees Ahan holding a rat in her hand, she yells, asking them what a rat is doing in their tent. Alna is giving Senai and Ihan a bath and asks them what they were thinking when they brought a rat into their bed. She tells them that they are not going to enter the house until they have had a herbal bath because mice can carry deadly diseases. The rat apologizes, but Alma tells her to wash herself, and the rat complies immediately. Alma scolds the three of them and tells them to sit in one place and think about what they have done. Dias thinks that it is doing a number on them, but getting scolded is teaching them a valuable experience. Dias thought that the rat was an attacker they missed, but Alma said that they registered as a strong blue. Maya calls Dias to show him what had happened to the field overnight, and he is shocked to see that the field had actually sprouted overnight, but they find it strange that they used two different soils, but in spite of all of that, it's growing in a perfect circle. Alna congratulates Diaz because she never actually thought that the crops would take root and calls it a miracle. Alna says that she knew Diaz was a great man and now his strong, unyielding hard work has finally paid off. Diaz is delighted that the field has done well, but what makes him even happier is that Alna is happy too. Diaz is carrying out the box that Amer was hiding in. Then a pigeon lands on the box and greets Diaz, but Diaz is shocked that even a pigeon can talk. He drops the box, and the pigeon tells him that his name is Jaren and he serves Eldon as his chief messenger. Diaz asks him whether he is a demi-human too, and the pigeon replies with yes. His people are known as the Pigeon Kin. He tells Diaz that he came to deliver a letter from Eldon and it is urgent. Diaz looks at the bag for a while, and only then does he realize that he is supposed to open the bag. Eldon tells him that some small ilk dog kin are interested in becoming his subjects, so he would like to know whether he would take them in. Diaz asks him what small ilk means. Small ilk look more like their ancestors and are weaker, while large ilk are stronger and resemble humans. They heard about Iluk village from their large ilk who went there, and now they aspire to live there permanently. Diaz tells him that once he gets approval from the rest of the village, then he will accept, and asks him whether he minds waiting while he goes to ask them, and Geraint says he doesn't mind. As Diaz turns back for a second, he sees Geraint drooling over the beans and asks him whether he would like to have some, and Geraint is overjoyed. Senai and Ahan are happy to hear that dogs are coming to stay in their village and say that they are going to play with them. Diaz tells Alna that he would like to talk to her in private about something. When they go outside, he asks her whether they told her anything, but Alna tells him no, but they seem sorry for what happened. When she asks them why they had a mouse in bed with them, they refuse to explain. And Diaz thinks that they must have a good reason for that, so he would rather wait until they willingly tell him. Diaz asks her what she thinks about him accepting more subjects, but Alna tells him to do as he pleases because her duty is to support his decision. Amer begs Diaz and tells him that she wants to live in his village, and Diaz agrees but asks her if she was in Eldon's domain. Wouldn't she be able to get back home someday? Eimer says that she wants to stick around with Senai and Ihan because she wants to help them grow. She may not look like it, but she is literate and knows basic math, so she says that she will work hard as a tutor for the girls or at some other job, and she begs him to let her stay. Diaz looks at Alna for confirmation, and Alna says that as long as she tries to keep things hygienic, then she can stay. Diaz got everyone's approval regarding the small ilk, and he also wrote to Eldon that he intends to take an Amer, so Jaren should pass that along too. Alna wakes up Diaz and tells him that they have visitors on their land. Diaz and Alna are running towards them, and Alna tells Diaz that she can sense multiple smaller ones and one big one. Dias sees the beast and asks Alna whether it is one of the beast kin that wants to live there, but Alna tells him that it is a lich anaconda and it is a monster. Dias sees that one of the dog kin is about to be swallowed and charges forward to save him, but Alna warns him to wait because they are unarmed. Dias punches the anaconda and holds it by its neck to choke it to death. After Dias kills the anaconda, Alna runs to him and yells at him because going up against a monster barehanded is crazy, but she calms down because she also ran out without weapons, so she is just as responsible as Dias is. Dias apologizes to Alna for being reckless and promises her that he will be more careful from then on. The dogkin yells for the other dog that got swallowed and asks him whether he is okay, but the dog comes out and everyone is relieved that he is safe. The next day, Canis thanks Dias and Alna for saving them from the giant snake that they spotted on their way there, and because of them, all of the dogkin were able to make it there safe and sound. Dias and Alna kneel, and Dias introduces himself as the Lord of the Grassy Domain. Canis is shocked to see Dias greeting her on her level. Dias tells them that they have had a hard journey and all of them are welcome to stay there, and all of the small ilk start howling in excitement. Canis thanks them, and Alna introduces herself to them. All of the dogkin start praising Alna's beauty, and she is liking the attention. Dias asks Canis whether she would like to immigrate there too, but she tells him no and that she works for Eldon as the caretaker of all the small ilk. She was accompanying them as their guide for the day, and the ones wishing to immigrate are the 3 clans with her. Canis tells Dias that the clan with the black fur are the Tide Masti. They are a clan of courage and great strength. The clan leader introduces himself as Marf, and Dias shakes his paw but tells Marf to not be so formal and that he should speak to him how any other person would. Canis tells Dias that the clan with the brown fur is known as the Banished. She tells him that it is a very serious clan, and they have even been called inflexible. The clan leader introduces himself as Sidorio, and Dias shakes his paw. Canis tells Dias that the clan with the black and white fur is known as the Osenshep, and the leader introduces himself as Shev and shakes his hand. Canis says that the clan names are very important to them, so Dias should try to remember each one. Alna tells Dias that she used soul appraisal on everyone, and Canis is white while everyone is a strong blue, and Dias thinks it is surprising. But Canis interrupts them and tells them that she forgot to mention that all of the small ilks like to work, and not having a job to do stresses them out a lot. She asks Dias whether it is going to be okay, and Dias tells her that there are all sorts of work to do around the domain. For instance, they need help making cisterns, the horses and cattle need tending to, and those who would like to can even serve as a soldier for the domain, and all the small ilk are overjoyed. Canis asks Dias whether he really meant that the small ilk would work as soldiers, and Dias tells her that they would normally be guarding the village at night and they would do a bit of combat training. In an emergency, they would also have to go into battle. Canis tells Dias that simple jobs are okay, but they cannot hold weapons with their paws, and they are also small, so no matter how willing they are, it wouldn't work. But Dias tells her that he understands her concern, but he feels like he can make it work. He asks Canis whether she is going to stay there for a bit, and Canis replies yes, she will be reporting to Eldon about how well the immigration is going. Dias tells her that he is going to convince her that the small ilks can be soldiers before she leaves. Dias calls out to Klaus, and he asks Dias whether those are the immigrants. Dias replies yes and tells Klaus that he will introduce them to him later. Dias introduces Canis to him, and Klaus gets flustered when he looks at Canis, and Canis asks him whether something is wrong. Dias tells her that he would like to show her the village, and Klaus accompanies them to the village. Alna looks at Klaus smiling and thinks that he is easy to read. 10 days later, the Basenji clan is drawing water from a well while the Osenshep are tending to the horses. It has been 10 days since the small ilks came to the Eluk village, and they are all doing good work. Senai and Ahan recently started their own garden, and it seems to be progressing well thanks to the help from the small ilks. Klaus is training the Tide Masti and tells all of them to attack him at once. They charge at him and strategically bring him down, and Klaus praises their good efforts. Klaus has slain numerous enemy generals, and he is a fearless fighter that they use to call the head collector, so the fact that the small ilks only took 10 days to bring him down is impressive. During the war, the enemy's dogs were a huge thorn in Dias' side. The small ilks have the skills to rival them, and they can even speak, so from the way Dias is looking at it, they will do peerless work. They can even use tools well after a bit of tweaking, and they are managing daily chores and guard duties without any issues. Dias tells Canis that he is off to check on the field and leaves, but Canis hears the sound of a dog kin and sees a dog kin on the ground. Klaus runs over to ask him if he twisted his leg, but the dog kin tells him that he tripped over a stone. Even so, Klaus uses the cloth that was covering his spear to use as a bandage on the dog kin, and a moment later, Candace runs over and tells Klaus that she will help him treat the injured dog Kin. She tells Klaus that she has never met a human who would so readily treat an injured dog Kin, but Klaus says that what kin the person is from is irrelevant, and a comrade was hurt because he wasn't paying attention, and she looks at him astonished by what he said. In Sansarive Kingdom, at the first king's tomb, Diane tells her knight that the treasures in the royal tomb will be their war chest. The knight asks Diane what she is going to do with the scepter, and Diane tells her that she is going to use it, but the knight warns her that if word gets out that Diane entered that forbidden place and carried royal treasures out, she might end up being censured. But Diane tells her that no one is going to censure her, and she is going to strike down Diaz for betraying them. She will do it using the scepter, which the first king used to have reduced 10,000 enemies to ashes, and after that, Diane will use the fortune that he is hiding along with his dragon materials to fund raising an army to strike down her meddling siblings and take the kingdom for herself. She tells her knight that there is no need to be worried because she has another secret scheme, and Prenicia notices that she is holding the king's seal. Diane tells Prenicia that she also heard the man say that during the war, Dias slaughtered innocent civilians. They still hail Dias as the kingdom's heroic savior, but his achievements were all fabrications, and Diane says that it is time for her to show the work of true justice. The man that told her the fake story is standing on a cliff and laughing about how easy it is to trick royalty than the beast Kin. If Diane slays Diaz, then he will have his revenge. And then, if he slays Diane after that, he can put his father and others to shame, and he will be known as the hero in the kingdom. In the royal palace, Prenicia fills Prince Richard in on Diane's plan, and she tells him that she will continue her infiltration and gather more information. But Richard tells her that there is no need and she should just be on standby for her next orders. He lets out a sigh, and everyone starts analyzing the situation they are in. They ask Richard whether he is going to have the nobles in his faction mobilize their troops, but Richard says that there is no need to interfere, because if they pursue them, then they would be at significant risk of encountering Dias. They are wondering why Richard keeps saying they should avoid Dias and ask Richard whether he is that dangerous. Richard tells them that the kingdom's heroic savior is not his only nickname, and that people also call him Dias the Kindly and No Balls Dias. It is the way he got those titles that betrays his true nature. During the war, there was a royal order to slaughter the enemy kingdom's subjects, but Dias refused to obey the order and told the soldiers under his wing to not kill anyone either. They ask him about the other title, and Richard tells them that there was once a military unit made up of the sons of nobles who wanted to make names for themselves in the war. One nobleman's son went along when he saw two other men try to have fun with an innocent civilian. Diaz was nearby, so he came running and managed to subdue the three men present and question the noble on why he would do that. Because he didn't like the answer the noble gave, he stepped on his balls. They ask Richard if a commoner assaults a noble, would they not be put on trial at the palace? And Richard agrees, but because Diaz gave a good reason for why he did it. The king decided to let him go and publicly praised him that he did the right thing as a subject of the kingdom. Richard says that Diaz doesn't take kindly to those who cross him, and it doesn't change anything if they are noble people or royalty. One of them is shocked and asks Richard whether he has attacked royalty before, and the other says that, once upon a time, there was a very willful boy who was spoiled by his parents, and she asks Richard whether she should continue. Richard tells her to continue so that they can fully understand the story. Richard declared that he wanted to fight in the war, and he found himself surrounded by the enemy on the battlefield and was captured until Diaz came to rescue him. Then Diaz hit him on the head and scolded him for doing something so reckless. Richard says that is the only time that someone has ever hit him before. Even when Diaz learned who he was, Diaz still scolded him, and for the next 3 months, Diaz worked him hard, and that was how the influence of Diaz made Richard become a hardworking, honest, and upstanding man who does not discriminate against commoners. They think Diaz sounds like a good man and wonder why the king banished him to the frontier, but Richard says that the king did not banish him. He left the grasslands in Diaz's hands because he thinks that Diaz can do something with it. They heard that Diaz was left out there with no money or help, and Richard says that it was probably his brother Miser that stole the money that was meant for Diaz. If their kingdom is led by the corrupt, then it will be doomed to fall, and that is why they must do something. Richard tells Schill to pay Nereus and tells Nereus that he needs him to bring Diane and the king's seal back before she makes contact with Diaz, and on the off chance he comes in contact with Diaz, give him half the money because it would be a travesty if the kingdom's heroic savior starved to death. In the Kazdak's domain, Eldon is welcoming Diane after a long journey, but Diane gets straight to the point and tells Eldon that she believes that she will slay Diaz, confiscate his assets, and use them for the good of their kingdom. Some of her men deserted along the way, and now she finds the number of the troops she has low, so she hopes she can count on Eldon's cooperation. Eldon tells her that he will need to see proof that Dias is a traitor, but Diane shows him a letter and tells him that as the lord of the Kazdek's domain, he is hereby ordered to comply with her request by investing all of his forces and finances in assisting the subjugation of Dias, and Eldon is shocked to see the king's seal. Dias tells the dog kin to raise the board to let the water flow, and they are happy that it worked. Geraint flies to Dias to tell Dias the news of what Diane said. Eldon is checking the royal decree, and they find out that it is unmistakably the seal that the king uses for his exclusive use. Eldon wonders whether they can stall them, but the bunnykin tells him that they are buying time off the welcome feast, but Eldon says that they cannot let Dias be involved in the royal capital's power struggle. They tell Eldon that they understand how he feels, but it is a crucial time for him, and they advise him to proceed with caution. Dias is a personal friend of Eldon, but he is not speaking on a personal level. He is cultivating fields in the grassland, and he is doing what no one else has been able to do. If the vast prairie becomes a breadbasket, Kazdek's domain stands to benefit from it too, but if Dias is struck down with it, then that potential will vanish with him. Geraint comes back in time and gives Eldon Dias's response, and Dias told Eldon to cooperate with Diane as the royal decree states. Dias is at home polishing his armor, and everyone is preparing for the battle that is about to come. Candace tells Klaus that she doesn't want him to die, but Klaus tells her that her saying that gives him joy, so he promises to come back for her and she should wait for him. After that, Dias and Klaus are then seen standing on the field and analyzing the troops that are there from a telescope.